My girlfriend showed up at midnight with 3 kids and suitcases, then tried to take over my life. Reddit story. You're watching Juicy Story, where the internet's most dramatic Reddit posts get the spotlight. And trust me, today's one gets messy. Make sure to hit like and subscribe so you never miss a story this wild. My 26-year-old girlfriend with 3 kids says I'm not partner material, but she lives with her baby daddy. I'm a 20-year-old guy, and my 26-year-old girlfriend keeps telling me I'm not partner material. But here's the part that's messing with my head. She lives with her baby daddy. He pays her rent. He pays the internet. He pays the electricity. And somehow I'm the one she says isn't stepping up enough. Now she wants me to move in with her, start helping pay her bills, and prove I'm mature. And the more I think about it, the more I'm starting to wonder if I'm being set up to walk into a situation that's going to ruin my life. For context, my girlfriend and I actually have history. We first met about 2 years ago and dated for roughly 6 months. Back then, the relationship moved really fast. We were both really into each other, but eventually things just fell apart. It wasn't some huge dramatic breakup, more like the kind where both people slowly realize the relationship isn't working. So we went our separate ways. For almost a year, we barely spoke. Then a few months ago, we randomly started talking again. One thing led to another, and we decided to give the relationship another chance. Now we've been dating again for about 2 months, and that's where things start getting complicated. My girlfriend has 3 kids. That alone doesn't bother me. I knew that from the start and accepted that dating someone with kids means their life is more complicated. The bigger issue is her living situation. She currently lives with her BD, her baby daddy. According to her, the relationship between them is basically over. She says he's mentally draining, manipulative, and that living with him feels like psychological torture. But despite all that, he still pays for everything. The rent, the internet, the phone bill, electricity. Basically, the entire house runs on his money. She tells me she wants to leave that situation eventually and build a life with me instead. And recently, she started talking about us moving in together. At first, I thought that conversation was happening way too soon. We've only been back together for 2 months. But she talks about it like it's the obvious next step. And that's when the pressure started. Because at the same time, she talks about building a future with me. She'll also say things that completely mess with my head. Sometimes she tells me I'm not sufficient partner material. Other times, she says she doesn't want to talk to me about certain problems because I wouldn't understand them. And once she even said she hopes I'll step up, but she's already accepted that I probably won't. Hearing that kind of stuff honestly makes me feel terrible. So naturally, I try to understand what she means. I ask her directly, what exactly do you want me to do differently? But every single time the conversation goes the same way. She'll sigh and say something like, if you were more mature, you'd be able to figure it out. I shouldn't have to explain it. And that's it. No explanation. No examples. Just this weird feeling that I'm somehow failing a test I don't even know the rules for. But here's the confusing part. Most of the time, she's actually very affectionate. She tells me she loves me a lot. She sends sweet messages. Sometimes she talks about our future like she's completely certain we're meant to be together. So I keep thinking maybe the problem really is me. Maybe I'm just inexperienced. After all, this is the only long-term relationship I've ever had. But then something else started coming up more often. Money. She was raised pretty comfortably by her parents, and she's used to people taking care of her financially. Because of that, she sometimes hints that I should help her out with money or pay some of her bills. And that's where things get really uncomfortable. Because I live alone, I pay my own rent, my utilities, my food, everything. And I'm also trying to save money for my future. So when she hints that I should be helping her financially, it puts me in a really awkward position, especially because she still lives with a guy who is already paying all her bills. A few days ago, something happened that really shook me. We were talking about the future again, and she brought up the idea of moving in together. But this time she added something new. She said if we moved in together, I would need to prove that I could support the household. At first, I thought she meant we would split responsibilities. But that's not what she meant. She said she expects the man in the relationship to provide financially, especially because she has children. Then she said something that honestly stunned me. She said her BD had always provided for her, and she expects the same level of support from me. I didn't even know how to respond to that. Her BD is a grown man with kids and an established life. I'm a 20-year-old trying to figure out my career and survive on my own. The comparison didn't feel fair at all, but the thing that really made me start questioning everything happened a couple days later. She was venting to me about how awful her BD is, how toxic the environment is, how she can't wait to leave. But during the conversation, she accidentally let something slip. She mentioned that if she moved out, her BD would probably stop paying for everything. And then she said something that made my stomach drop. She said that's why she needs to know I'm ready to step up financially before she leaves. That was the moment I realized something. She might not be asking me to build a future with her. She might be asking me to replace the guy currently paying her bills. And suddenly all those comments about me not stepping up started making a lot more sense. After thinking about everything for a few days, I finally decided to have a serious conversation with her. I told her I cared about her, but I wasn't ready to take on the financial responsibility of supporting her and 3 kids, especially when we had only been dating again for 2 months. I also told her that if we were going to build something real, it needed to happen slowly, not with me suddenly replacing the guy who currently pays for everything. The moment I said that, her entire mood changed. She got quiet, not angry, not emotional, just cold. Then she said something that honestly caught me off guard. She said, "See, this is exactly what I meant. You're not ready to be a real partner." After that, the conversation basically ended. She stopped texting as much, and things felt weird between us for the next couple days. And I figured maybe that was the beginning of the end of the relationship. But then something happened that I still don't know how to process. 2 nights ago, my phone rang around midnight. It was her. She sounded panicked. She said she had just gotten into a huge fight with her BD, and she couldn't stay there anymore. She said things had gotten really bad, and she needed somewhere safe to go. Of course, I felt terrible for her. So I told her she could come over and stay the night if she needed to. About 40 minutes later, she showed up at my apartment. But she wasn't alone. She had all 3 of her kids with her. And not just that. She had bags, suitcases, boxes. At first, I thought maybe she just grabbed a few things in a rush. But when I asked what was going on, she looked at me like the answer was obvious. And then she said something that made my brain completely freeze. She said, "Well, you said you wanted to build a life together, so we're moving in." I thought she was joking. I actually laughed at first, because it sounded so ridiculous. But she didn't laugh. She just stood there on my doorstep with 3 kids and a pile of bags like she fully expected me to let them all inside. And when I told her we never agreed to that, she got angry. She said she had just left a toxic situation, and that if I really loved her, I wouldn't make her and the kids sleep in the car. Then she said something that honestly made my stomach drop. She said she already told her BD she was leaving to move in with me, meaning there was no going back. Now I'm standing there at midnight, looking at my girlfriend, 3 kids, and half her belongings on my doorstep, and realizing she may have just forced me into the exact situation I told her I wasn't ready for. I honestly don't know if this was desperation, manipulation, or something else entirely. Update 2. Living with her was a disaster. So after my last post, I made the decision that might have been the worst one of this entire situation. I let her stay. What was supposed to be a few days until she figured things out turned into her acting like my apartment was already her permanent home, and the change in her behavior happened almost immediately. The first morning she woke up in my apartment, she walked around the place like she was inspecting it. Then she started making comments. "This couch is uncomfortable. You should really get a bigger TV. The kids need more space to play." Not asking, not suggesting, just stating things like I had already agreed to redesign my entire life around her. Later that same day, she started rearranging my apartment. She moved my coffee table, reorganized my kitchen cabinets, started putting her clothes in my closet. When I asked what she was doing, she shrugged and said, "Well, obviously we're going to need space if we're living together." That word again, we, even though I had never agreed to that. But the worst part wasn't the apartment. It was the attitude. She constantly criticized everything. my job, my apartment, my lifestyle. She'd say things like, honestly, if you were a little more mature, you'd already be thinking about upgrading this place. Or, a real man would want to provide a better environment for a family. And every time she said things like that, I'd feel this weird mix of guilt and frustration. Because I'm 20. I'm doing my best just managing my own life. Meanwhile, she was sitting in my apartment all day, acting like I was failing some test I never signed up for. Then another weird dynamic started showing up. Whenever we argued about money or responsibility, she'd suddenly become distant, cold. Affection disappeared. No hugs, no closeness, nothing. At first I thought she was just upset, but after a few days I realized something. It felt like she was using intimacy as leverage. If I pushed back about money or responsibility, she'd emotionally pull away. If I apologized or tried to smooth things over, suddenly she was affectionate again. The pattern was impossible to ignore. It started feeling less like a relationship and more like I was constantly trying to earn approval. And somehow I was always failing. Within the first week, she started acting like my paycheck belonged to the household. She made grocery lists for the kids. She asked when I was going to start paying for school supplies. At one point, she even told me I should start looking for a bigger apartment because this one wasn't suitable for a family. That sentence honestly made me laugh out loud. A family? We had been back together for 2 months. 2. But she looked completely serious. Then she said something that really showed how she saw the situation. She said, well, my BD always made sure we had what we needed. I assumed you'd want to do the same. That's when it hit me. She didn't see me as a boyfriend. She saw me as a replacement provider. But the real disaster happened a few nights later. My cousin had come over to my apartment that evening. He sometimes crashes on my couch when he's in town. He knew a little about the situation and honestly thought it sounded crazy from the start. That night, my girlfriend went out with a friend. Around midnight, she came back, and she was clearly drunk. Not just tipsy. Drunk. The moment she walked in, she started complaining about the apartment again, about how small it was, about how I wasn't stepping up enough. My cousin was sitting there watching the whole thing unfold. At one point, she looked at him and said something that immediately made the room tense. She said, honestly, I don't even know why he thinks he's ready for a relationship when he can barely take care of himself. My cousin looked at me like, are you serious right now? But things got worse. When I tried to calm her down, she snapped. She started yelling about how she left her BD for me and how I was supposed to take care of her now. Then she said something that made my cousin stand up. She said, if he doesn't step up, maybe I should have just stayed where the real money was. The room went completely silent. My cousin didn't hold back. He said, so let me get this straight. You move yourself and 3 kids into his place, and now you're insulting him for not funding your life. She exploded, started yelling at him to stay out of our relationship, started accusing him of trying to turn me against her. And then she said something that instantly ended everything for me. She shouted, fine. If he can't handle being the man of the house, maybe I should go find someone who actually can. That was it. Something in my brain just switched. All the pressure, all the manipulation, all the entitlement. I suddenly saw the entire situation clearly. So I looked at her and said something I honestly should have said weeks ago. I told her she needed to pack her things and leave. Tonight, she thought I was bluffing, until I started grabbing the bags she brought when she first moved in. Then the yelling turned into pure anger. She called me immature, said I ruined her life, said I betrayed her after she left everything for me. But for the first time since this whole situation started, I didn't feel guilty. I just felt relived. Eventually, she stormed out with the kids and a couple bags. And now my apartment is finally quiet again. But here's the part that makes this whole thing even crazier. About an hour ago, I got a text from her. Just one sentence. She wrote, you'll regret this when you realize what you lost. Final update. The truth finally came out. So after the night, everything exploded and she left my apartment. I honestly thought that would be the end of the story. I figured she'd go back to her baby daddy or find somewhere else to stay. Either way, I was just relieved the situation was over. For about 2 days, my phone was completely silent. No texts, no calls, nothing. and I finally started feeling like I could breathe again. Then something unexpected happened. I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. It simply said, "Hey, this is Mark." Mark is her baby daddy, the guy she had been living with. The guy she told me was mentally abusive and psychologically torturing her. My first reaction was honestly confusion. I thought maybe he was angry and wanted to confront me about the whole situation. But the next message completely caught me off guard. He wrote, "Look, I'm not trying to start drama. I just think you deserve to know the truth." Then he asked if we could talk. At that point, curiosity got the better of me. So we talked on the phone. And what he told me completely changed how I saw everything. First of all, according to him, their relationship had actually ended months ago, but they were still living in the same house because of the kids, and because he was helping financially until she figured out what she wanted to do. That part alone already didn't match the story she told me. But then he told me something that made my stomach drop. Apparently, I wasn't the first guy she tried this with. He said about a year ago, she had dated another guy for a few months and suddenly moved in with him after a big fight. And within weeks, she started expecting him to pay for everything. When the guy refused, the relationship exploded and she moved back into the house. I literally sat there in silence for a second because that story sounded exactly like what had just happened to me. But the biggest revelation came next. He told me the night she showed up at my apartment with all those bags. She hadn't actually been kicked out. She left on her own. In fact, according to him, she had been talking about moving in with me for weeks, meaning that entire dramatic midnight situation, the I have nowhere to go story, the kids and the suitcases. It might have been planned. When he said that, everything suddenly made sense. The pressure, the expectations, the way she acted like my apartment was already her home. It wasn't desperation. It was a strategy. After that conversation, Mark and I actually ended up talking for almost an hour. And weirdly enough, we both realized we had been hearing completely different versions of reality from the same person. But the story doesn't end there, because the next day something happened that felt like the final piece of karma. She texted me again. This time she sounded completely different, suddenly apologetic. She said she overreacted that night. She said the kids missed me. Then she asked if we could talk and try again. Apparently things hadn't gone well after she left my place. Her BD had refused to let her move back in permanently, and suddenly she needed somewhere to stay again. 2 weeks earlier, that message probably would have pulled me right back into the chaos. But now I knew the truth, so I kept my response simple. I told her I hope she figures things out for herself, but I'm not the person who's going to solve her problems. Then I blocked the number, and honestly, for the first time since all this started, I felt completely at peace, because the more I think about it now, the more I realize something. I didn't lose a girlfriend. I escaped becoming someone's next replacement provider. And if I'd ignored my instincts just a little longer, I might still be stuck trying to support a life that was never actually mine to begin with. That's the story. But the real question is, what would you have done in a situation? Let me know below, and I'll see you in the next juicy story.